I would hate to be the person to have to choose between those three, and we're not talking about your prom dates. We're talking
All three of my prom days?
We're talking. Well, maybe you went to 3 proms. I don't know. You went to the North Hall prom as well. It's Georgia's quarterbacks. That was Brock Bowers talking about Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton, and Brock Vandegrift. Of course, Brock and Carson in a really, it seems like a 1-2 fight to win over the number 1 spot. They really do have a very good quarterback room. There's no question about that. But they will have to decide, Georgia, at some stage, who the best quarterback is to lead them in this season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's stupid to just kind of assume it's Carson Beck.
No.
Right? Assuming is usually dumb, but in this case, all the fingers are pointing in that direction. And just from the eye test, I mean, just stick to the eye test. He's the best guy right now, and that's where we're at. And I think that's what it's going to be. When is an official announcement? There may not be one until game day.
So let me. I'm sorry, Ryan.
You're good.
Let me just say this about announcements with starting quarterbacks under Kirby Smart. I'm not aware that they have ever happened. So I'll go.
That's a good point.
Let me go through the litany real quick. Stick with me. In 2016, I reported that Jacob Eason was going to start. He did not start. He just played the bulk of the game against North Carolina. He was going to start, but they just kind of. I probably made the right decision. Just sort of said, you know what? Let's just kind of. And Grayson Lambert started that game. A year later, Kirby did say in 17 that Jacob was their starter, but it took him until media days, and then of course soon thereafter Jake Fromm became the starter. I don't recall going into 18 him ever saying that Jake Fromm was the starter over Justin Fields, but that was very much implied. A season later, it was clear that Jake Fromm was. Now in 2020, it didn't break that Dwan Mathis was going to be the guy until pretty late in the process. It was not announced. He just was the first quarterback out there. He was also he played one more game at quarterback, and that was it, which was the Florida game. The wild thing was that I believe Stetson Bennett was announced as the starter when Mississippi State came to town when JT Daniels started that game. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I believe Stetson Bennett was named the starter over the PA. Okay, now I might be wrong. We'll see. And then
he was. I was there.
Okay.
I think he was, but JT was warming up and all that.
JT was with the ones.
There. Yeah.
So my long point of all this is that in all of that time, announcing starting quarterbacks, that's something that's kind of gone away at Georgia. We haven't seen that since the Mark Richt times, which I can tell you about the one time that really happened in a second here. Pick up our 2023 guide. It comes with double dogs. Add this to your portfolio today. This is not going to last long. You buy double dogs, you get the preview for free. If you just want the preview, it's on there as well. Our friends at Red Zone are helping making this happen, so check that out. In 2006, Matthew Stafford, Joe Cox, Joe Tereshinski, and Blake Barnes were fighting for the number 1 spot. We had a Sunday night phone call with Mark Richt. He announced that Joe Tereshinski was their starter. He further announced that Joe Cox was their backup, and that the co-number 3s were Matthew Stafford and Blake Barnes. Do you know who Blake Barnes is?
I remember Blake Barnes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What's funny about it is I don't remember one of those names, though. I don't remember
Joe Tereshinski?
I don't rember him. He's like completely out of my memory.
Well, Joe Tereshinski was, not a great quarterback, but a very good football player. But he got hurt against South Carolina. Matthew came in, and somewhat the rest is history. But they didn't handle that perfectly either. But this is what it is anymore. And with Kirby, he said today that what happens in games will absolutely matter because quarterbacks don't get tackled in practice. And with Brock Vandegrift, I have to say that's got to matter some.
Yeah,
Brock Vandegrift.
You'd have to go back to 2019 to where there wasn't a question as to who Georgia's quarterback was going to be that season.
Well, 22 was Stetson.
That's what I'm saying. No, yeah. I'm saying like that was the first time in a couple of years. 22, right? Obviously, it was Stetson. But before that, I mean, there's a 3-year period in there where there's just a bunch of unknown. You don't know who the guy is.
Nope.
And look, as good as we think Carson Beck might be, he might be bad.
He might. We don't know what we don't know.
We have no idea. And all of them could be bad. We don't know that. All of them could be really good. And if you put them all out there, maybe there's a scenario where all three of them, if they were given a chance, Georgia wins the national championship, right? But we're not ever going to know that because you can't. And Georgia's quarterback situation. I mean, 2019 and 2018 were the only 2 years where, it was Jake Fromm, but then the years surrounding that, all of the years around 2018 and 2019 were a little bit dramatic. And that could happen again this year. But it seems like it's going to be Carson Beck. I do think all of them are good quarterbacks. I think Bowers said today, I'd hate to be the guy that has to choose between the three of them.
Yeah, that's the opening of this. Yeah. Sometimes I talk too much and get sidetracked, but I think they know where they're going. Brock was talking today about how he was very comfortable with Mike Bobo, or Bobo, as he's called. Poor Mike. But they're comfortable. One other thing Kirby said in the big room, this is media days vernacular. There's a big room, there's Radio Row, and then there's the little room or little rooms. And in the big room, which is what y'all see on television, he was talking about how all of the assistant coaches from the season ago, all of the assistant coaches for this season, are returning for this year. They may not have been assistant coaches at the time, Mike Bobo, but they're all from the season ago. He was talking about Jonas Jennings being around forever. He was talking about, a lot of different people, how many alums are in the organization, and not just Brian McClendon, Mike Bobo, Kirby Smart, Todd Hartley, and others, but just permeating their organization. But there is change at quarterback, but there's a lot that has remained the same. I mean, Hugh Freeze is starting over at Auburn. I mean, they punched the button, blew it up, and they're betting on Hugh Freeze to change things. Florida, Georgia Tech. There's been a lot of changes around Georgia, but Georgia has been steady, and I think that's been a lot of their success, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they're just so good. Like they're just so much more talented when you think about Georgia teams even just 5 years ago. They're so much more talented, and it shows up every single week. Doubting over time that I watch Georgia, I do doubt them less and less and less just because of how much they've got around them. But this team with the quarterbacks, I think that their chance to succeed is a lot higher than other teams because of how good the team is around them.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And that's the difference between even just 2020, right? With look at how, I mean, obviously Stetson grew as a player, but when he had a way better team around him, he was able to succeed a lot more. So when you have a team and a program and a system and a coach like Kirby, you'd think that no matter which one of these guys goes out there, like their baseline of success has got to be like their floor should be higher. Like the concept of ceiling.
I think their floor is high.
Your floor should be high when you have all of you have around you.
Yeah, they've got a lot of players who are really good, and collegiate sports come down to how well do you recruit, because you cannot play people who are not at your school, and they've done an exceptional job of getting players, to play well and developing them and so forth. They've done a very, very good job with that. I mean, Cedric Van Pran was a really good player, but I don't think there was a certainty that he would be a 3-year starter at Georgia when he came in. So there's some credit to Cedric on that too, but the development, not just from Matt Luke, but from Stacey Searles as well. They have Kirby and them. I think the thing about Kirby that is even underappreciated is just how good a job he is at being detail-oriented and organized. His messaging has always been good. He's always on offense, no question. But all of that adds up to he I think can see the 40,000-foot view in a sheet of paper, the executive summary. And that's how they'll run this quarterback competition, and for whatever you want to call it, quarterback competition. I don't know what other name to call it, but in the fall is, okay, this person can get his shot at this moment. How do we compare that apple to the next apple that's coming up? And all that said, they will have to pick someone, and my suspicion is that it will be Carson Beck.
Yeah, and
that's my suspicion.
Yeah, he's been around a long time. I was trying to think about that in a more negative way the other day, just to kind of look at the devil's advocate, because I feel like I've been pretty high on Carson this offseason. But
sure.
Look, I mean, he never beat Stetson out. He never beat JT out. I've been kind of looking at the other side of the coin recently. What makes him ready for this moment if he wasn't ready before? And I don't know the answer to that because I don't get to watch practice.
My suspicion is time.
Time could be the thing. I mean, those guys were older than him, and they played more football than him. And he's probably 21 years old now.
So Carson Beck, to make the case for Carson had never been a starting college quarterback before he started. Well, he's never been a starting quarterback.
He's never started a game.
Well, Stetson had.
Yeah.
JT had. So they understood a lot of what was going on. That said, it doesn't mean that he can't have success. What Joe Burrow did at LSU is one case. I mean, Jake Coker at Alabama in 2015. So you cannot win it. Well, Carson Beck, I think inside the program there's a lot of optimism that Carson Beck is a very gifted passer of the football. I also think, though, that he's become a better quarterback. And you could see that on G-Day. I mean, it's obvious sometimes. You don't have to take our word for it. You just watch. And I think Brock Vandagriff had some plays that went against him that kind of weren't his fault. But at the end of the day, it felt like Carson was more steady and consistent. And I don't think I think that's very, very valuable in this sport. But anyway.
Well, at that position.
At that particular position.
You want a consistent, good decision maker at the quarterback position. I've heard Kirby say that over and over. You hear all sorts of people in the football world. What do you want out of a quarterback? Good decision making and consistency. And we saw that at G-Day with Carson for the most part. I mean, it impressed you the moment that game started, they just flew right down the field. I mean, just flew right down the field against the first team.
And that's the other thing too, man, is that Mike Bobo's never really had a defense that he's worked with. No. He's had decent defenses like the 12 defense, but none of them. Like, these are just buzzsaws, these Georgia defenses. So I think, there's going to be leeway there. I would be very curious to see the discussion between Kirby and Mike. They've never worked together as one being the play caller and the other one being the head coach. They've worked together. But they were both assistants at Georgia at the time in 2005, and they've just really competed against one another for the most part. And Kirby's won most of those battles. But I will be very curious to see too what happens with Mike Bobo and all that. But Mike will be the one that's got to make this decision. Someone will have to choose between these three quarterbacks.